We have to wait a little bit, it seems, so we're going to have a 1 minute break, and we're going to start in a few seconds. Go? Yeah, here we go. That's live. So very happy to welcome you for this chat. We are three here, so I'm Olivier. I'm in charge of coordinating this MOOC. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm representing Externalities Energy Cluster. So a pleasure to be here. And we have
Joachim Schleich. Welcome to this Hangout session. In case you didn't recognize me from the first two MOOCs, I was the one presenting the MOOC on global energy challenges and also on energy efficiency policy. And I'm a professor of energy economics here at Renewable Management. And I'm also in charge of the energy team here at Renewable Management.
And Mark?
Yes, my name is Mark Olshorn. I'm a member of the energy team Joachim is heading. I was presenting session 1.6 on energy efficiency trends and markets. And I'm a PhD scholar in the energy team at Renewable Management. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mark. So the process is that we have a chat here online. So we invite you to ask all the questions that you want. Feel free to ask on different points from the MOOC, on the topic of energy issue, on the focus on energy efficiency, and we'll try to provide you complementary answers. So we are very happy and open for all questions. And after it's online, so it might be not completely fluent. We have 30 seconds to adapt because here we're live in Grenoble. And on YouTube, we have 30 seconds. So sometimes there might be a time lapse between what we say and what you can react on. So be active, and we'll be happy to exchange, give you complementary information. So one of the first questions is how these new energy technologies will shape our sustainable future. So who wants to take this answer? What's the impact of new technology regarding sustainability?
Well, there are several dimensions to it. There's, on the one hand, you've got the supply type technologies, the ones that are responsible for generating electricity and heat and transportation, modes of transportation. So they will change business models of technology of companies. It may mean, think about electric vehicles. The companies that were constructing the motor, the valves or whatever, like Bosch, they have to get into something else if these automobiles run on electric motors. So it's a completely different technology. The companies have to look for new supplier, new supply chains, and so that's the supply side, which will be totally different. Think of who's generating electricity. They may be more decentralized. Think of the PV, concentrated solar power installations. Think of wind and think of biomass. They're all small, decentralized, located technologies rather than having the big gigawatt type power stations, nuclear power stations, or 100 megawatt type coal power stations. So that's the supply side. That will be very different. And the same is on the demand side. We've all discussed different types of technologies that many of you are working in. We're quite surprised about the type and quality of feedback of participants we've received. All kinds of energy saving technologies. You get the smart grid technologies that allow you to align demand and supply because of the fluctuating electricity coming from renewables and wind power technologies, which are by most the technologies of the future. These type of technologies actually allow you for a more sustainable energy system. So they are enabling technologies, and I think they are chances. They help us creating sustainable energy system of the future. I don't necessarily see them as a threat. I think they're helping us towards a more sustainable future, which means less carbon emissions.
But in the first place, it's a challenge for the future because we see now that some technology are emerging, they are happening on the market, but the need, the maturity of the market is not always on time. So there's a kind of gap between technology push and the demand, the maturity of the demand and the finance to access, to buy this technology. So the future, we know that we have some challenges regarding low carbon emission and climate change mitigation, but there's also a political and financial gap to bridge if we want this technology to access to the market. So that will be also a big challenge. We have another question that came, so we can complement these points. It could be interesting to discuss renewable economics in this time of low oil price. Also, I was wondering why wind energy was not part of this MOOC. So I can answer for the wind part, and you can answer maybe about oil prices. It was part of the barometer analysis of the GEM energy team. So regarding the wind, it's indeed a hot topic for renewable, and it's a very interesting new energy technology. So we have strong companies and business here, but it was not formalized in the cluster, and we are not already organized to address this technology. So we decided to keep it for the future. And the MOOC was already 6 weeks, so it's quite long. And so it will come maybe next year. And maybe we can send some links to go further for people who are interested about wind. Maybe after the week 2. The week 2 will be on solar. And maybe at the end of the week 2, we'll give online on the forum some links on the wind sector. So that's the point for the wind. I hope it answered the interest. Joachim and Mark, what about the vision of these new technology in the period of low oil prices?
Yeah, the question is concretely about renewables, and well, renewables, you can use them for heat generation and electricity generation. So for heat generation, I think there is a challenge from these low oil prices and also low gas prices, because they make the competing technologies cheaper. So that means solar thermal energy is relatively more expensive compared to heating your apartment with gas or oil. So that's bad in that sense, and actually supports what Olivier indirectly was mentioning in his response before. You need, for some technologies, we still need public policy support until they are sufficiently mature to compete with the incumbent technologies. For electricity generation, I think the current oil prices are not that much of a challenge, because you don't really use oil a whole lot to generate electricity. It's mostly coal and also gas and nuclear, of course. So the effect is rather indirect, to the extent that the low oil prices you see also mean lower gas prices, but since most renewables are still supported by government policies, at least in the short term, I wouldn't expect a really big threat there in terms of fusion of renewable technologies for electricity generation. And that's also the outcome, Olivier was alluding to that too, of a recent survey we did also together with Mark, who's heavily involved in it. An expert survey of French energy market experts, and we specifically asked that question: what do you think are the effects of the low oil prices on renewables, for example? And the answers our experts provided pretty much reflected what I was saying. If you're more interested about the energy market barometer, I think in one of my comments I gave the link. Or if you go to Grenoble École de Management, or you Google Grenoble École de Management Energy Market Barometer, you have access to all 5 or 6 versions that we've put out so far.
We'll provide again the links on the barometer and on the wind point. There was a question on energy efficiency approach in Europe, Latin America, and Caribbean regions. Is there some difference? Do you have a vision about the different maturity of energy efficiency policy or markets with different regions? Mark, do you have a vision on that?
I'm not an expert on Latin America or the Caribbean. I'm not sure what's going on there in terms of policy. I know for Europe, Europe has relatively high energy prices compared to, for example, the United States, or it used to be the case. So energy efficiency was much more important for European businesses and industries competing on the international market to be efficient, to be cost competitive, just for economic reasons. So I think in that respect, Europe has some head start on the other side of the ocean in terms of energy efficiency, and Europe is also currently, well, the European Union has a pretty ambitious energy efficiency target. Some say it's not ambitious enough. Well, we're not there yet, so yeah, we'll see what's happening. I hope we'll make it by a huge margin. But that's a strong driver to improve energy efficiency. I think it's also driven by the idea of European competitiveness in the global market, and as well as carbon reduction.
You have some elements about Latin America or Caribbean?
One additional aspect is some or many of the poorer countries are heavily depending on imports of fossil fuels, imports of oil. So in that sense, they're more vulnerable to changes in the oil prices, and their energy efficiency can help. And the potential is not exploited by far. And in general, I think it's fair to say that the level of energy efficiency is lower in South America and the Caribbean. Also, you have to distinguish a little bit about technologies. If you think about Northern Europe, it's cold there in the winter, so insulation is much more important. Versus in the Caribbean or in large northern part of South America, it's more you're not so much worried about the cold winter, but rather maybe about the too hot summer and insulating the house for those reasons. So it's different technologies that are interesting in different markets.
So we have a new question. Besides the benefits of having clean energy, what is the possible side effect, negative effect, of the usage of renewable energies? So what are the drawbacks of the growth of renewables for energy systems?
Well, besides the many advantages that there are, it's fair to say there are some drawbacks, especially as the nature of these technologies is quite different. They're decentralized, and well, the big ones like solar and wind, which we rely on in the scenarios for the future, they're intermittent, so they produce energies when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and doesn't really match with the current energy system, which is centralized, going from the centralized production to consumers, and the supply is following the demand. But now with these renewables, the demand cannot be, or the supply cannot be, supply is given, and it's variable. So we need to have demand follow supply, or have some other solution in between, like storage of electricity, and that is still underdeveloped. So that's I wouldn't say it's a negative effect of renewables. It's just a challenge we have. There are other negative effects you can think of. Yeah, you can think of the impact renewable energies have on the landscape, for example. Wind energy, solar energy, they take much more land than centralized coal-fired or gas-fired power stations or nuclear power stations that we're used to. So there are some challenges there. Some say it's a negative impact. Well, I tend to agree. No one likes to see windmills in beautiful landscape, or very few people do. And solar farms, they can take up land that cannot be used for other purposes anymore. So those are challenges that need to be addressed.
So other point are the cost, because some of these technology are costly, higher cost than regular fossil-based technology. So there's a point about investing, but if carbon has no prices yet, we have to identify externalities. So when we integrate externalities, it is interesting to invest in renewable, but on the short term, on the short period, it could be costly, and also it needs new technology developments, because as you say, intermittency, complexity sometimes to integrate new technology needs investment in the network, in the grid. So these are challenges, but like you say, I think it's not drawbacks. It's key factors for success in the integration of renewables. We have a next question. What is developed today to store sustainable energy when not needed at the time it's produced? Wind energy during the night. So that's a question about storage issues. There will be a focus on it on the week 6. So we'll have a focus on smart grid and storage. It will be led by Marion Perrin from CEA, a research center. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. But indeed, there's a need for investment in storage. You want to add something about the links of energy, renewable energy, and storage solutions?
I can say a little bit about it without taking too much away from the next modules. Well, there are different types of storage technologies. You can have battery systems at home that store electricity when it's not needed, and then you draw on your battery when you need it, maybe at night when the sun is not shining, and you want to watch a soccer match. Or there are actually some storage technologies that help storing electricity within the grid. This is pretty new. Or you could store electricity. You could, in terms of hydrogen, you know, producing hydrogen, using electricity to generate hydrogen, and then you transform it back on. So you're changing. You're talking about this, right? So you're actually changing your product. Or you could, and this is actually what Mark has looked at in his dissertation, as part of his dissertation work, is you could shift load, you know, from times when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing, and there's not enough supply in the electricity system, to times when there is enough supply, and you could do that by pricing systems, making it expensive when there's not enough supply, so companies have an incentive to shift their load, maybe produce electric arc furnace steel or certain chemical products which are highly electricity intensive, like chlorine production.
It's called demand response.
Yeah, it's demand response. Yeah,
we have a company developed some solution technology called Energy Pool. It's a company based in Savoie, just close to the Grenoble region. Energy Pool has a offer to load shade or peak shave and from the network, and they are contract with major energy users or electro-intensive industry, and it's growing very well. So it's a new business also. So it's not just storage; it's also adaptation and impact on the grid.
Yeah, I think with that demand response, you can do actually a whole lot and decrease the need for storage to a big extent. But it requires like incentives for users to adapt their energy use, and especially for residential users in many countries, rates are regulated.
Yep.
So to actually implement it, you need regulatory change to enable demand response to also enter the residential market, and that is well, there you enter into a whole lot of social dilemmas. Like, we used to have regulated rates to protect vulnerable populations from high rates and vulnerable rates, and now we want to let that go for this. And who's going to pay more? Who's going to pay less in the end? So those are real issues that need to be discussed. So it's not that easy.
Yep. We'll see some new technologies on storage, also new business model. There are some companies like Tesla with the power wall, and also Schneider Electric with EcoBlade storage system. There's a German company you talk about on the forum, Sonnen, I don't remember the name, who is providing a home storage battery.
Oh yeah. It's a RWE. The product was named some kind of solar. What they do is they offer combined storage and PV system, photovoltaic systems. So they put the photovoltaic system on your roof and the battery in the basement or on the attic, and combined, the two systems combined actually allow up to 70%, 72, 75%, depending a little bit on your consumption patterns, of course, of the electricity you actually need to be generated either through the photovoltaic cell or the battery system. So you only need like 30% from your utility,
from the
grid.
Yeah.
And households who really like to be autonomous, they really like this. There's a drawback, of course, high upfront costs.
Yeah.
Because the systems are expensive. They shield you towards price fluctuations afterwards, but you have to invest. So again, this is an option where maybe some smart business models, maybe you could lease those from the company and you just pay a monthly rate or things like this could be developed. And there's a lot going on. It's a pretty dynamic market, and you see this kind of offers spreading and emerging, not just in Germany but also in other countries.
So we have other question. Is there positive factors in implementation of renewable systems in countries that are suffering economic crisis? What are the benefits of renewable for countries who are undergoing economic crisis? Maybe there's link with Africa, or they're not going through economic crisis, but in countries with less investment capacity, or I was thinking about the point of avoiding importing fossil fuel.
Yeah.
So definitely one of the interest points is to generate locally energy, and then when it's linked to energy efficiency, there's a double effect. You need less energy if you invest in energy efficiency, and if you produce locally, you avoid importing. I remember that, it decreased with the reduction of oil price, but I have in mind the 400 billion euros per year, which is the cost of importing fossil fuel in Europe. So it's more than 1 billion euro per day. So, we will still need a lot of fossil fuel, but imagine that we boost the rate of renewables. It means avoiding sending money for oil-producing countries. So there is also an interest to shift for developed countries like France or a country in Europe, but also for countries who are undergoing economic crisis. If they have the ability to invest, they can be less dependent from oil producers.
Yeah, you're basically substituting imports from the Middle East for local employment. In particular, as Olivier pointed out, for energy efficiency, even more so than for renewables, electricity supply technologies. Because think of all the workers that put insulation on your walls, in your basement, on the roof, and that's just very labor. It's very labor intensive, and there's a lot of research that actually shows that this is good for employment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're a supporter of Keynesian economics, then investing in such measures is always a good thing during times of crisis.
In what?
If you're a Keynes supporter of Keynes, the economist.
Ah, okay, Keynes.
Like anti-cyclical investments.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, if you're not, then still in energy efficiency, there are lots of opportunities to invest that are actually profitable.
Yep.
Or we think they're profitable. So that there's a investment opportunity which allows you to make money in a pretty short term. So in times of crisis, can open your eyes up to these opportunities.
We have to read again John Maynard Keynes. So one question also is about the education perspective. What is the scope of pursuing master and PhD in the field of energy system? Regarding impact of research or education, you have some insight about doing research and education in energy systems?
Well, energy is it's an interesting topic that doesn't go away. It's not a short-term kind of hype. It's a topic that will be important, that will be relevant in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. You can build your entire career on it. There's so many facets to it that not all the topics fit into a 6 weeks MOOC class, like wind energy, for example. But there are many other topics that were not covered. So it's in terms of your own investment that you make in a topic for your dissertation or your master's, it doesn't depreciate so fast. Apart from having, which is important to some of us, I think also a societal perspective. It's something that's important to society, and that just may get you motivated. And going for a PhD means, and I think Mark can vouch for that. There are ups, but there are also downs. So if you work on an interesting topic, it helps you getting through the down parts. And also in terms of employment, afterwards, you want to get a job too. And there are many jobs in the energy industry, emerging industry, being created by government regulation, by technological progress. We think there are many very interesting topics worthwhile to be pursued, and there are still research gaps that have to be closed.
Maybe we can share on the forum during this week if we have links on energy masters or PhD program. If some of you are interested to pursue a study in the energy sector, maybe we can share some links, and we invite you to present or to make some links with a program existing. And we have a PhD track here on the energy issue in Renewable.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up, Olivier. This wasn't planned. We actually have a brochure, which you can see here, about pursuing a PhD in the energy team at Renewable Quality Management. And I won't read to you the entire brochure now because it's downloadable on the web, and it was created by some faculty and also graduate students involved. So if you're interested in corporate management of energy transitions, if you're interested in clean energy innovations and sustainable and social venturing, if you're interested in institutions and governments, governance of a low-carbon society, so that's emissions trading and so on, or drivers and impacts of energy-efficient technology diffusions, the Grenoble École de Management PhD program may be the program you want to do your PhD in, if you do really well on the requirements, that means GMAT and so on. But you can find information on the web.
Okay, thanks. So there is a lack of consensus on carbon price impacts, development of energy efficiency markets. How does Energy Efficiency Consortium on industries have interests and can positive lobby on that? So the question is regarding, I tried to reformulate it, what could be the impact of carbon price on this market of energy efficiency? Mark, do you have an insight?
Well, actually, firms that are not on the loser side, I would say, the less energy-intensive firms mostly, they're already arguing for lobbying for a carbon price. I think there are consortia of front-running firms. Maybe I think in America it's like firms like Nike and Pepsi and Coca-Cola, Unilever, for example, that are heavily lobbying for a carbon price. On the other side, there are firms or sectors that have more to lose, that are a bit more conservative on that. So it depends on very much on the interests of the industries themselves, in which way they are lobbying. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there are also, depending on what your portfolio looks like with your energy mix, if you're producing with gas and nuclear power, so like EDF or so would be pushing for a carbon tax for obvious reasons, because their competitors are relatively worse off if they rely on coal in particular. And you actually see that if you look at the policies that are being pursued by some companies also on either side of the Atlantic. You see different stances on that.
Okay, there's another question on carbon tax. Are carbon taxes policies considered as a viable approach to promote global energy transition and investment in technology development? So is the carbon tax a good tool to stimulate investment in renewable energy?
Yeah, well, the carbon tax is I would say a very generic tool, and it's targeting the specific goal of CO2 reduction. So in that sense, I think many economists agree that it's a very efficient tool to reduce carbon emissions. So in that sense, yeah, it can help to reduce carbon emissions. It doesn't really necessarily lead to an energy transition. Well, it probably will, because it's a logical consequence of it. Yeah, so I think, well, personally, I think climate is the prime challenge for the energy system, and then a carbon tax would not be a bad idea, in my opinion.
I share your view. I think it would be also a good tool. It has very important consequences for installed industry and actors, so it's a major shift. But I think we need indeed a signal on prices to change the mindset and the vision of the future. So some countries have set up carbon tax policy with arriving calendar. So it changed the mind and the investment policy. So I think it could be a strong asset, and I would love to see that European policy first, maybe, and then a global introduction of carbon price in different zone with different rhythm, because we do not have one price for all the countries and all the continents, but a specific policy regarding some countries and assets. And I think it could be a big help for climate mitigation and investment in clean energy.
Yes,
yep.
There are only a few things that economists tend to agree on. Keynesian the demand side policy is one of them. But the carbon tax is something that I would say 95 to 99% of the economists would agree on. This is a good thing because it steers innovation, it provides incentives for innovation in low carbon technologies. And that's definitely an ideal instrument to address the issue of global warming.
Yeah, it's very difficult to implement though, so, which has been proven by reality, because if one country does it, it puts its own industry at a disadvantage. So you have to, well, that's the argument, you have to organize it internationally all at the same time, which probably is very difficult. Maybe there's some way in between, like you proposed, but the difficulty is in implementation, not so much in the strength of the idea itself.
Maybe we'll share some links on carbon taxes paper or article that are interesting. And please, if you have read some interesting papers, do not hesitate to share it on the forum, so we can have also discussion and exchange. And I invite you also deeply to participate to the forum, to exchange views, links, and ideas, or videos, extra videos. Feel free to share vision, and also to talk to your friends and neighbors about this MOOC, because we're going to just start now other technologies, and we could have more participants on solar, hydropower, and biogas, which will be the next topic. So do not hesitate to share and invite new colleagues or students from your neighborhood or association or companies to join. So we're going to take maybe two last questions. So what about the rebound effect? Saving due to energy efficiency are spent on other energy consuming activities. How will we face this problem? The rebound effect. Could you define it a little bit more?
Yes, I actually done some research on it too, so thanks for the question. The rebound effect emerges because due to energy efficiency, the unit of energy you're using, energy service to be precise, becomes cheaper. So if something becomes cheaper, you tend to use more of it. So that's the direct rebound effect. So you may end up leaving the light on a little bit longer, or you may end up purchasing a brighter light bulb, or you may end up driving longer distances with your car, or you take the car for purposes you haven't taken it before. Then there is more of an indirect rebound effect, which means you have money left over, because you're not spending it on electricity, for example. And that money you're spending for something else. Maybe you're flying to Singapore rather than taking the car to, I don't know, the nearest mountain range when you go on vacation. So there's this indirect effect, and it also has a macroeconomic effect, because energy efficiency means that the demand for fossil fuels in particular is lower. That has implications for the global market, so the price of coal or oil becomes cheaper. So someone out there is paying a lower price. Maybe other countries are paying a lower price than for oil. And so there's a macroeconomic implication as well. And the question then is, okay, how large is this rebound effect? And there are many studies out there. For most applications, I think it's rather low, maybe 20%, below 20%. So that means only 20% of the original savings are being spent more in terms of energy use. For transportation, it may be much higher. And what can you do about it? Implement a carbon tax, for example, or an energy tax, like making it more expensive. That's the best solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. That's an interesting topic, the rebound effect. Maybe we could share also a paper if you have reference to provide for the participant who want to read something on the rebound effect. You want to add something?
On the rebound effect? No.
Okay. One question is, does renewable booming market hit the oil and gas sector directly? So is there like a competition between investment in energy sources? That's how I understand the question.
Yes, of course. If one technology can substitute for another, you get it gets pushed out. No, you get competition, and that hits. It's felt by the oil and gas industry very much so. In fact, I think yesterday or so there was a report that for the first time CO2 emissions global CO2 emissions have not risen, and that was due to the booming solar and wind sectors. So in that sense, where the CO2 emissions come from, you could say, is an indicator of fossil fuel burning.
Yep.
So in that sense, it's being hit. And closer to home, in, for example, the Netherlands, I know many gas-fired power stations are actually pushed out of market. They're mothballed, not running all the time, because of these large shares of renewable energies in Germany, like wind and solar predominantly, that come at zero marginal cost onto the market and push out the more expensive generators.
And we see it for big utilities who are dependent on assets who are based on fossil fuel, like E.ON or Engie. They are shifting their strategy, decided to decommission and to reduce their investment in coal and gas to switch to renewable. So, and the valuation, the value of the company has to be reevaluated or to reorganize because the assets are completely different. So it has also an impact on strategy of firms, and it's interesting to see also how oil and gas companies like Total are also investing in renewables. We know here that in the region a company called SunPower, which is an American and now a global company, is supported by Total, who invest on it because they are a relay of growth for the future because it's a booming market, and in some country the growth of oil and gas will be tackled. So there is also strategic consequences of these challenges. We're going to take one maybe last question or two. How can people or household be encouraged to move to renewable energy, considering the return on investment is on many years and the cost of storage is still too high? So is there maturity for investing in on renewable and storage yet? Maybe on different scale?
Well, you can impose a regulation, which is the case in some countries, including my own country, that Germany, if you're building a new house, a certain share of the electricity that's being consumed has to be renewable. So that's the easy part. Of course, there may be some opposition to it. You could incentivize it, subsidize it, or companies can come in and, so I mentioned earlier, rather than having this relatively high upfront costs imposed on the investor in the first place, and you're talking about 10,000, 20,000 euros right there. Split it over many years, have some leasing systems in place, paying a monthly fixed rates, and that may be much more palatable to household customers, and this could actually be a win-win situation, because the company has access to the capital markets typically at much lower rates than the average household does. So there could be a win-win situation, and also part of an adjusted business models for the utilities.
But the trend with also new regulation, new incentives will rise the average price of electricity, particularly. So maybe the return on investment will be rapidly achieved, because if the cost of energy goes up, we know in the same time that the cost of technology are declining. So the return will be much much easier. And if we had a carbon tax, it will go even more faster.
Oh, and isn't it the case that in some parts of the world, solar systems are already at grid parity, so the energy from solar is cheaper than from conventional power generation?
We're going to see it with the solar topic. You're right. It will be next week with some case on solar, and we're going to talk about Latin American country who are already on that level, but you're right. And the last question is, what will be the externalities of energy sector when everyone will produce his own energy at home? Wow, that's interesting.
Externalities on the energy sector. So from a technical perspective, I'm not an engineer, I'm just an economist, but as I was told, if you have many, like the grid also has a cushioning function, because you have many supply sources and demand sources on being connected to it. So if everybody produces its own decentralized electricity, you don't have that safety function being fulfilled that the grid was taking over in the first place. And costs may be higher. So just because it's decentralized doesn't necessarily mean it's cheaper. A different perspective is, and that actually refers to what was mentioned before, or maybe I could have mentioned before, if you don't need to invest in the grid in the first place, and maybe that's the case for many rural areas in Africa or South America, then it's also cost efficient if you don't have to invest in the grid. Think of all the cell phones out there in South America. That there are no landlines, so it's the diffusion of cell phones is much faster than in any other regions in the world, because you didn't have to invest in the grid in the first place. And it's similar, it could be similar for decentralized electricity generation technologies.
And we have a think tank here on the cluster that think about the Internet of Energy, and we want to identify what could be the trends and the impact of a new paradigm, a new vision about the future of energy and the future of utilities. When will it be massively involved with renewable, local generation and local consumption with some energy storage? And what could be also the position of consumer, who could become what we call prosumer, so consumer who are also generator and producers of energy. So indeed, it's a very interesting question, and maybe we'll have extra time to think about this disruptive innovation and consequences on the market of the booming of renewable, and the impact on utilities and on prosumers and consumers. So I would like to thank you guys for participating and participation. We'd like to thank the team who hosts the technical parts and the pedagogical part of GEM. So thank you for participating, and we'll share some ideas and links, and feel free to give insights, links, and debates on the forum. And we will see you next week for an extra hangout on solar energy with some colleagues on the topic. So have fun, go to the end of the videos this week, the quizzes, and see you next week online and on the forum. Thank you very much, and bye-bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Tschüss.
Adios.